Folks, hello and welcome to Tavern Chat. I'm the host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, your main proprietor at the Tenkar's Tavern blog, the Discord server, the thing. So, I keep on hearing that, like, old school RPGs, you guys won't like 5e because 5e is too complicated for you. You like the old school stuff because it's simple. And when we think of a lot of times we think of old school RPGs, we think of basic D&D. Most of or a large part of the grognards seem to have gotten their start on one of the versions of basic, right? There's like three flavors plus the rules cyclopedia, and what basic does very well is it introduces D&D and the concept of role playing in a way that's not overwhelming. And I think that many, if not most, of the really successful old school OSR retro clones use basic D&D for inspiration, right? Labyrinth Lord, certainly. Uh, Adventure Conqueror King system, definitely. Um, OSE, Dragon Slayer, a lot of smaller ones. Why is that? Even Swords and Wizardry, you can say, yeah, it's white box, but it almost feels like basic D&D. It's written in a very clear way that white box was not. Okay, again, basic D&D is there to instruct you on what role playing is and how to play it. The white box assumed that you had some knowledge and somebody to hold your hand, essentially. So, many successful, many influential old school OSR RPGs are based upon a variation of the basic rules, the expert, whatever, and that's where they draw a huge part of their reference. Now, AD&D, 1E, um, okay, we've got Adventures Dark and Deep, we've got Osric, uh, we have Sunrising Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, or simply Hyperborea. And to a large extent, Castles and Crusades. If you look at Castles and Crusades, it feels a lot like AD&D 1E. And there's a reason for it, because AD&D 1E was extremely popular. It's what brought me into gaming. But it also wasn't the easiest game to pick up on. There was a lot of stuff that confused us, which is why the rewrites are so important. But hey, I was an early GM who had a player's handbook and a DM's guide. I didn't have a monster manual. I didn't know that what HD stood for. I thought HD in the back of the GM's guide was hit points. So all my monsters had, one, two, three ogres, 4+1. Why are they 4+1? Just say five. Oh, I guess because of the combat chart. Wasn't until I got the Fiend Folio, because monster manual was later purchased, then I saw what hit dice were. The rules contradicted themselves, right? They had a bard class that could not just dual class, triple class, and didn't need the same requisites as somebody else, less stringent requisites, somebody else who was just going to dual class. So get to the DMG. Different resolution. Oh, well, if you're going to go into unarmed combat, it's a percentile system, but melee and range combat is a D20. But, we got psionic, so we're really going to throw you a curveball. Not even going to go into Unearthed Arcana, which some people consider to be the cutoff. That when it comes to AD&D, that AD&D stopped being AD&D once you put in Unearthed Arcana. Which is why I think that there are less games that try to reinvent AD&D. The rules are more complicated. It's easier to build on something that is less complicated, but we'll move on from there. Because then there was AD&D Second Edition. Now, AD&D Second Edition, when it was first released, we didn't know about the politics going on behind that Gary was kicked from the company. We didn't know any of this stuff. We didn't have the internet. The house organ was dragging, right? They weren't going to tell you. But initially, AD&D 2E was a cleaner system than AD&D 1E. They got rid of things that were needlessly complicated and that we just didn't even use anyway, like weapon speed and weapon versus AC adjustment. Didn't use any of that. But then 2E started with the complete handbooks. And once they got past the core classes, they started with the races. And once they got past the races, they had to go to humanoids and bards. And it was a never-ending cycle of unplay-tested rules. Now, when you look at old school OSR clones, was it for Golden Glory? Is the only one I think I can think of offhand that's a 2E retro clone. Adventures Dark and Deep by Joe Block is really what 1E would have morphed into, most likely if Gary had stayed on the project. But it's not 2E. All right? 2E is something that we don't generally see. Right? And if you do see something that's working off of 2E, you certainly don't see the player's options books. I don't hear people talking about the player's option books. This was at the end of the 2E lifespan. This was, I guess, proto third edition. I'm going to feed some things out there. Spells and Magic. Was it? The other one was, I can't remember, Powers and whatever. Skills and Powers. There we go. So D&D was not necessarily a simpler game back in the day. AD&D with the endless splat books, and now we're playing Joe the Lawyer's game, a 2-week campaign that, quote, by the book with numerous house rules, about 2,000 pages. But no, none of the splat books, but we are using the Forgotten Realms Demi-Human God book or something like that. It makes for an interesting game, and I'm enjoying it because I ran 1E. I ran 2E back in the day. But coming back to the OSR, I've run Swords and Wizardry Complete, which is essentially AD&D Light or AD&D Basic 5. And that seems to be what my sweet spot is, basic with a little advanced. Which why Dragon Slayer is something that really appeals to me. Which is, why Shadow Dark, even though it's a 5e engine, the chassis is very much old school. I don't think that 5e is necessarily more complex than poorly written AD&D 1E was. And I'm not taking swipes at Gary. Game design hadn't advanced at that point, and having various subsystems was part of the genre. But like endless splat books in 2E, a rule for everything in 2E meant that you had a stack of books. But 5e is a rule for everything, but the everything rules are probably in the core books. Still more than I want. I like the free form of old school gaming. I like the free form of the original or older rule sets. 5e as written, and I'm not saying you can't run it more freeform, but as written is too rules confining for me. But again, old school gaming was not necessarily simple. Look at Chivalry and Sorcery or any of the FGU games. You're going to see rules that you're going to scratch your head and was it Aftermath and but we played them back then, right? Because this was what we did. Now I want to play games that are light enough that I don't need to refer to the rules throughout the game session, especially as a GM. Which is why you're going to see me running Swords and Wizardry Light, Dragon Slayer, OSE, my sweet spot, because I like to be unencumbered. And I think that when we look back at our days of gaming as old school gamers, I don't see 1E being all that encumbering in retrospect. But then when I really look back and realize how many rules I jettisoned, and we kind of hand waved a lot of shit, and then with 2E, the bloat, yeah, I can see why with the OSR we focus on things like basic D&D and build off that. Just an observation. Just an observation. So, folks, another video tomorrow. Live stream Wednesday. Gonna be a good one. If you want some dirt on Ken Whitman, we are gonna supply it. Guys, very special guest and a very special co-host, and a chef's kiss. A Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Other than that, folks, the link on the bottom of the screen will take you to Humble Bundle. Listen, if you want to support this channel, that is how you support, besides subscribing, liking, and commenting. But it'll take you to a bundle of Pathfinder 1 material, pretty much from Frog Eye Games and Kobold Games. And listen, if you can't convert that stuff on the fly to an OSR rule set, you got to work harder. All right, folks. God bless. Laters.